Okay, so today we're going to talk about the ONOS project. And first I'll start with our mission. And the mission has been to transform the service provider infrastructure with open source SDN and NFV platforms and solutions. And we really want to bring the economies of data center and the agility of a cloud to the service provider infrastructure. Okay, so the approach that we've taken has been to build open source SDN operating system for service providers. And we did that by starting to address the challenging scale, performance, and HA requirements. So since the very beginning, our focus was to make sure that we had an architecture that was going to support the type of scale, HA, and performance that would be needed by service providers. And when we started this, it just wasn't clear that that was ever going to happen with the other projects that were out there. And we started this 3 years ago. We're also all about leveraging white boxes and commodity infrastructure, and have put a lot of focus on that, much more so than on how do you configure the existing devices. We build open source SDN NFV solutions so they can be rapidly deployed in the service provider networks, and again, that bring economies of data center and agility of cloud. So we're really trying to help vendors create value with open source and white boxes, helping to create a vibrant, sustainable community. Okay, so this is our community. It starts with Open Networking Lab, and the role of Open Networking Lab is to provide architectural integrity and shepherd that architecture to make sure that it stays true to the needs for service providers and provide that core engineering and a real focus and accountability. In addition, we have the leading service providers that are our partners, and they make ONOS and SDN solutions relevant. So they're the ones that really define where they want us to be spending our resources. Okay. In addition, we have partners for vendors that are leading vendors and service providers, and they make the solutions real. They bring in engineering resources. They put a lot of effort and knowledge from their product backgrounds, and they make sure that it's ready for deployment. So currently we're funded by 12 of these service providers and vendors. Okay, and we have a number of collaborating organizations. These are organizations, companies that want to bring value into the ecosystem, whether it's through code contributions, whether it's through deployments, whether it's through, for example, like Black Duck that does free code scans to make sure that the code base is very clean. Okay, so that's what our community looks like. Okay, the journey that we've been on with the ONOS, which started again 3 years ago, in a clean slate design, we came out open source in December last year, so we're about 10 months old in the open source community with the AWOSET release, and then we're on a quarterly cadence. So we've released in February, May, and most recently in August. And with the first release, the goal was to make sure that we had the right architecture, that it was functionally complete, and that we had the ability to really get people on board and start using it with documentation and different use cases. Okay, and then in February, we really put a lot of focus on performance, and we have a white paper that has been presented out there, because up till that point, the performance in OpenFlow and SDN networks was not very well addressed, and so we proposed many more metrics that are both related to the application's expectation of what they can push into a controller for requests, as well as the latency they get, and also from the network devices, because it's very important to be 50 milliseconds or less in response to network events. So I encourage you to take a look at that. Then in the May release, we really put a lot of focus on some of the service provider use cases, and I'm going to go into more detail on these. And then the most recent release had a few main themes, one of them being upstream in a number of distributions, such as OPNFV, collaborating with OpenStack, Atrium, Cloud Router. And then we have a big focus on security as well, because there's a great opportunity now to get security right. Security is difficult, and we've had a partnership with SRI really since we began at ON.Lab, and they are really the experts in the field, having put security into a number of controllers along the way. So we have something called security mode ONOS, and then a number of other device configuration enhancements. Okay, and so now we're heading into many more lab trials and deployments. Okay, so that's been our journey. And in the last 10 months, I think we've really established ONOS as a premier open source SDN project for service providers for mission critical use cases. We've had a really strong engagement of the service providers and the vendor partners to create and deploy those solutions. The ONOS platform solutions are heading toward market trials and deployments. We've demonstrated technical leadership by shepherding ONOS Community with focus and purpose. And the ONOS developer community is growing really rapidly around the globe. And there's a lot of people now contributing new features and capabilities. And you may have seen we announced this week that we've partnered with the Linux Foundation. And so from an ONOS perspective, we continue creating open source and doing the SDN and NFV innovation with our partners. We continue to shepherd ONOS with a focus and purpose. We continue to manage our releases and manage and deliver the use cases that service providers need. From a Linux Foundation perspective, we're going to really get them to start leading some of the promotion and the outreach to the community. There's nobody better than them in helping us scale, so that's a big part of it. Helping us administer the project, providing guidance and counseling for our project, and really driving a curriculum for community training. So I think it's a really great partnership that we're entering into. Okay, and from our perspective, we provide structured technology innovation, and if you add that with a structured open source innovation, you really get a best-in-class developer experience. Okay, so the virtuous cycle between platforms and solutions. So you start with a platform, in this case ONOS. That enables different solutions. Solutions such as central office re-architected as a data center, and again, I'm going to go into these in more detail. Those solutions then bring back capabilities that enrich the platform, and we start over again. And so we alternate release to release, whether we're working on infrastructure or whether we're working on use cases and POCs that take advantage of that infrastructure. So first, let's talk a little bit more about the platform. And again, the platform, from the beginning, our value proposition is scalability, high availability, and performance. We also believe that we're trying to build an operating system, one that provides useful abstractions at the northbound so that it's easier to write applications, as well as at the southbound, so that we can kind of factor out all the differences of devices. And a key factor is also modularity, so that our partners and users can very easily go in and make the changes that they need in the operating system for their particular environments. Okay, so to get this type of performance and scale, you have to build a distributed system. And in our case, we have a cluster of ONOS instances. You can have as many instances in that cluster as you want. So this is 3 servers, as shown by the vertical instances. And each instance runs the same software. They're all identical, so they can disappear and reappear, and the others take over the workload. So each instance is a master for some subset of switches. So that's one way to get the scaling out across the larger network. And the beauty, really from both the switches viewpoint as well as an applications viewpoint, is this looks like a single system to them. They don't know that there's multiple instances running. Okay, and then the tiers, horizontally, we start at the bottom with our southbound, which again abstracts away the protocols and the device specifics. So whether you want to use OpenFlow, whether you want to use netconf, whether you want to use OVSDB, BGP-LS, we have a number of different plugins at the southbound which allow you to discover what the network looks like and information about the network. That information is brought into the distributed core, and this is the hardest part of all of this. It's the core that provides the scalability, availability, and performance, because these are all interrelated. And we spent 2 years working with Google, with Microsoft, with Amazon, with some of the best distributed systems people in the world, and Stanford, by the way, to the point where we really felt like we had an architecture that was going to be one that could last and provide the type of performance we were looking at. And so after that point is when we came out open source. But it's a very hard problem, because we're expecting millions of flows coming in from the top, and at the same time we're expecting 50 milliseconds or less of reaction time from the network. It's a really hard problem. Okay, then at the northbound we have useful abstractions for the applications. One is a network graph, so an application can program directly to a view of the network. We have intent-based interface, so you can ask the network to provide some type of services without having to tell the network how to do it. And we also have one which enables an application to be written once, so it can take advantage of different pipelines in the OpenFlow devices, because as you know, different vendors' devices can have different pipelines, and if you just wrote one today without an abstraction like that, the application would have to know what the pipeline looks like, and so we don't think that's a good idea. So we have a really nice abstraction to handle that. Okay, and so now let's take a look at some of the solutions. We have a lot of traction with the providers and different types of solutions. Some of the providers here, and we have, again, the central office being re-architected. We have a number of people interested in transport SDN. We have, we have a multicast use case. It's heading for production towards the end of this year with DirecTV. So a lot of interesting use cases at different stages. Okay, central office. If you love museums, go see one, right? There's a lot of great networking gear at them. There's about 5,000 of them just in AT&T's network, so you can imagine how many there are around the world. They are not set up to be highly dynamic, scalable environments. There's a great opportunity there to make them that. So one of our goals is to bring the data center economies to these central offices. We do that by providing commodity access devices, commodity servers, commodity switches that run a data center like fabric, and we control that through SDN, as well as controlling the network functions through orchestration with another open source project that we have that's called XOS. Okay, so this is Cord, and the software architecture for Cord brings together OpenStack for managing the virtual infrastructure, ONOS for managing the fabric and hosting the control applications, and then XOS for managing services and composing services. Okay, and we showed one domain of use in June at the Open Network Summit. That was a residential use case, but there's a number of other domains of interest that can use exactly the same architecture, whether it's in a central office or a switching center. So if you want to run a set of 5G services, or you want to run a set of 4G services, or if you want to run enterprise services, you can use the same architecture, just a different set of access devices. Okay, another POC that we've been active with has been managing the IP optical network, and what we showed in June was how we can take different optical domains. In this case, we had 3 domains, one from Ciena, one from Fujitsu, and one from Huawei. ONOS is able to connect to the optical devices and manage those devices through TL1 and PSEP providers. The IP layer provided by Corsa, as well as Huawei. ONOS connects to those through OpenFlow, and then able to manage both layers together so that you can have applications like on-demand optical bandwidth, advanced multi-layer restoration, and multi-layer network optimization. Okay. The next step for this one is in each of those central offices. So a metro is basically a bunch of central offices, right, that are connected. So here you have the metro. In each of those central offices, you have your ONOS cluster, and then the types of services that you have in a metro. Some of the ones you might be interested in, like E-line or ELAN, E-tree, so point-to-point, or some kind of a video distribution. And in being able to create a solution like this, then we need to have another instance of ONOS that's aware of all of the optical and IP that's going on in that metro. So this will be the next kind of proof of concept that we're working on with our partners in the IP optical space. Okay, we get a lot of deployment experience through the research networks around the world. We've deployed, well, you heard about some of our deployments with Jayant in one of the previous talks, but we're also deployed Internet 2 and then AmLite in South America, and have been working in addition to deploy on CreoNet in Korea. Okay, and as you go through this virtual cycle, there's a goal in mind, and that's to get it out into production. And so we bring these into the POC stage, and then into a lab trial, then out into a market trial, and then out into production deployment. Okay, and so this helps the service providers transform their infrastructure, and also helps both the vendors and the service providers work together to invent new business models. Okay, we've got a pretty ambitious solutions roadmap that's coming. First is us continuing to do the deployments in the R&D networks. The central office, we're moving towards market trial in early 2016 with AT&T in a residential use case. In addition, we have the enterprise use case, and that is of great interest to China Unicom. We have the packet optical solutions, and there's a few different vendors that are offering different solutions in that space. And then we have a mobile cord POC that's on its way. And so when we get to Mobile World Congress and ONOS 2016, we plan to show some demonstrations of that. So there's a lot coming up in 2016. It's going to be a big year. Okay, so the last thing I want to say is there's a lot of open source projects out there. We keep kind of hearing this as in some sense, a complaint, right? But ONOS is pretty unique in a number of ways. We have a governance model that's really a mix of technical meritocracy and benevolent shepherding as opposed to dictatorship. We like to think of it as shepherding. But we really are setting out to make service providers successful. And so the voting is there to make sure that even though there may be fewer service providers as partners, that they have a very strong voice that's at least equal to the vendors that are involved. And then we have a use case steering team which sets the priorities and direction for the way that the engineering resources are deployed. And the partner dollars that we get, again, we're a nonprofit, right? So our partner dollars go to funding that core engineering team that keeps the integrity, that keeps the accountability, and drives the requirements that the service providers have, okay? And I think maybe most importantly of all, Steve Jobs used to love to point this out, it's what you say no to, right? We're not trying to be all things to all people. We're trying to be really excellent for service providers. Okay, so some takeaways. We've got a lot of momentum in ONOS. We've got a proven architecture. We're having really fast growth in the community. We've got a number of deployments, and we have a number of POCs to market trials that are coming up. And Cord is one of these things that looks like it's kind of a killer app. Everyone is really very excited about it. And a big part of it is because you're taking SDN, which is allowing you to virtualize your control plane, and NFV, which is allowing you to virtualize your data plane, and then everything we've learned from the cloud about how to scale, right? And you bring those three things together, and you're able to scale these services, okay? And then last, and very important, especially this week, is our partnership with the Linux Foundation. And our goal there is that we get a really best-in-class environment for developers. Okay, so thank you very much.
Do we have any questions, comments for Bill? I think you... Oh, no.
I wonder who got hold of my slides.
Somebody hacked your slides.
Yeah.
You didn't put up the secure version. But I think you may not, I don't know, does everybody appreciate how revolutionary this is in the network environment to really be able to do this? I mean, you're going to remember the day when you really started to understand what the network operating system started to mean. Have you found operators having trouble shifting their paradigm to this more distributed, scalable model?
Absolutely. Yeah, this is a big change for them in many ways, cultural, architectural. Yeah, it's a struggle. I mean, there's There's pockets. It's interesting, even within operators, right? There's pockets of people that totally get it and they're totally excited about doing it, and then there's other pockets that are just holding on tight. It's like, well, wait a minute, what are you doing? We can't do things that way, right? So, I think helping them through those transitions is very, very satisfying. But they're pretty much getting it at this point, and it just takes a while. You know, operators have a lot of. They're big. They really care a lot about quality. They've got a lot of systems in place, and it's a tough challenge for them.
I'll ask you one more question, which is, you see the cloud vendors starting to realize that you've actually gone beyond what they're doing today?
Yeah, perhaps so. I mean, maybe an example is Google. I mean, Google's actually been very helpful to us as we were putting the architecture in place, and we've tried to get them to become a partner. And at one point, they said, "Well, really, you're enabling competitors, so we really can't do that." So that's one example, maybe. No.
Any final comments, questions? Please do talk to Bill, and please do spend some time to understand what ONOS is. They've got some great webinars on the net, and it's really worth spending some time. Thank you very much, Bill.
Yeah, thank you.